Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Anastasis Tzanis. He's a yoga teacher, nutritional therapist, and globally sought breathwork expert. Welcome to the show, Anastasis.
Nice to meet you, AJ.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people will benefit across the world globally from what we will be talking about. We'll be talking about the power of breath work for optimal health. So before we come to that, Anastasis, please tell us a bit more about yourself, your journey, so that the audience hears exactly, understands more about you from you directly.
Sure. So a few things have contributed to coming to the place where I'm now, and the birth of my first book, which was called Breathing for Yoga. But in a synopsis, I can say that the first two jobs that I had contributed to where I'm now. And the first one was servicing the military. I was in special services in the Greek army as a paratrooper for 1 year. And obviously, this is a high stress environment. This is an environment where you need to use your body a lot under challenging situations. And this was very stimulating, but I was finding at the time that there was a lot missing. And what I was primarily missing was the mental stimuli, the mental challenge. And then a few years later, I was in banking. And after studying in the United States, I was in the trading floor in London. That's when I arrived. And I spent there 6 years. And then again, it was very stressful environment, very different from the army. But this time very mentally challenging and less so on a physical level. And these two stages of my career made me realize that a few things. One being that stress can be damaging for the health. Another one is that stress is necessary part of life. And ultimately that there is some way of balancing stress, managing stress. And maybe the best way to manage stress is to find some equilibrium between mind and body. It was at this time in 2000, maybe it was 2009, that I started practicing yoga, searching answers to the problems that the health problems that I was having at the time. And in the process, I came across breathwork, the importance of breathwork. And there I realized that we can maybe bridge the two, the mental functions, the physical functions. And I think breathwork is where a lot of the challenges that people face because of high stress can find the resolution.
Wonderful, wonderful. So now let's come to the power of breath work for optimal health. What is your understanding? Means we breathe and we breathe all the time. Without breath, will not be able to survive. So when you talk of breath work, how do you explain to people that it is different than the way we breathe every moment? How do you make it different? Explain in that manner so that people understand, okay, that breath is different, and this can in fact take care of stress and so many other things related to health. Help us from a very common person's perspective.
Yeah. So I think your question really framed very well, even though you didn't answer, but just from the way you formed the question, framed very well how one should understand breath work. You pointed out that we breathe all the time, but then there might be something slightly different that we might do when we are practicing breath work. And this is really at its heart what most people that start practicing breath work, they miss out. What we do when we are practicing breath work has nothing to do with when we breathe on a regular basis, but it will affect. In a similar way that someone goes to the gym and he will be practicing bicep curls and squats, he's not expected to do bicep curls the rest of the day or squats. But the more he does this at the gym, he will be able to walk, run, lift things effortlessly. So obviously during breath work, in following along with this parallelism, we want to challenge our body. We want to expose our body into a slightly higher stressful situation in the same way that squatting and bicep curls are going to be stressful for the body in the gym. But if we do that with our breath at certain times, we will be able to breathe more effortlessly, more efficiently. Now, following up on that, some people may wonder, okay, what do you mean effortless and efficiently? Like I'm breathing effortless and efficiently. And that might be true for some. Of course, it varies a lot. But a lot of people take for granted that they breathe without questioning the quality of their breath. So I often give this parallelism of posture. So everybody listening to us has a posture at the moment. But arguably, a lot of people would say that they would like to improve their posture. They would like maybe to stand more upright. They catch themselves not carrying their body in an optimal way. And the same might be true also for the way they breathe. So the way they breathe might be okay, keeping them alive. As you said, if they were not breathing properly, they would not be listening to us. But is it in the best way? Is it the most efficient way? And of course, there are assessments and tests one can do to identify the quality of his or her breath. And as someone improves it, they will be able to perform more tasks while breathing effortlessly. An example that might be useful for people to perceive is this one I often give of two individuals, one an Olympic athlete and another one of an maybe overweight man that has a sedentary life. So if we were to ask both of them to go up a 5-story building, they probably both manage that. But the first individual probably would do it effortlessly. He will be breathing very softly. His breath will not be taxed. While the second individual might be out of breath after a few, having gone up a few stories, maybe he will have a loud voice. And that's something that we can consider is like, especially when we are challenged, when we are under stress, when we are doing physical activities, is our breath effortless, soft, the same way that it is when we are sitting and reading a book?
Right, right, Anastasis. Now, you are also a yoga teacher. And so, pranayam is there a part of yoga? And you have talked also about breath work. You are a globally renowned expert on this. So, is pranayam and breath work are two same things you look at or you tell people, or are they two different things, and how do they differ if you find any difference in them? How do you explain to them, especially you are a yoga teacher, sometimes it can become difficult to differentiate?
Yeah, the reality is that with breathing we can have many different exercises, right? But if we don't take a bird's eye view and understand how each one, what effect each one has in the body, we can end up feeling overwhelmed and saying, oh, this is Kapalabhati, and now we have Bastrika, and now we have box breathing, and then we have Wim Hof breathing, which I got certified in 2016, or Buteyko breathing, and get lost in the details. But the reality is that no matter how many breathing exercises, Viloma, you name it. So no matter how many different breathing exercises, whether they come from the yogic tradition, modern traditions, we can sit here together and we can come up with a new breathing exercise. Ultimately, all of them, and when I say all of them, I mean all of them, have a specific effect in the body. And this effect will be primarily breathing exercises only, because we have physical exercises that can improve our breathing. But let's speak now about the respiratory ones. Will affect three of our blood gases: oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitric oxide. That's so important to understand. It doesn't matter the name of the exercise, it doesn't matter the origin. We will affect one of these three gases. And once we understand the effect of that the breathing exercise has on these gases, then we can say, okay, when we're practicing Kapalabhati, we are moving towards hyperventilation. We are dumping carbon dioxide. And as a result, we will have this effect. But the same thing happens with Wim Hof breathing. It's not that different. And then we can say the same. So for other exercises. So knowing that, because this is very, very useful, I think, for people to understand what I'm going to say now, the reality is that pranayama is depending on how it is practiced, it can be breath work. And depending on how it is practiced, again, it can be just random breathing exercises. So what I would suggest is we need to focus more on the effect as opposed to the origin. Yeah, we can have the same effect from two different from different pathways, but ultimately what matters is the outcome. I don't consider pranayama and breath work as separate things. I think that the majority of pranayama exercises originally, and that's something I'm covering in my book, originally was designed to help people breathe better, but a lot of the times the outcome is not achieved because of the way people practice them. A lot of the times it is practiced in a very gentle, very soft way. And as we know, we need to expose our body into a certain level of stimuli in order to have an outcome. If I go to the gym, going back to the example of training, and I do bicep curls with 2 kilos for 1 year, it's unlikely that I will be stronger after 1 year. But the same exercise, if I gradually increase the weight, chances are that I will be stronger. So the same thing with exercises. We can take, let's say, samavriti. So in samavriti, we have equal length of inhalation and exhalation. If the breath holds are also equal, then we have box breathing. But let's take with samavriti, independent of what the length are. If we practice it and I breathe in for 1 second, maybe pause for 1 second, doesn't matter, and then exhale for 1 second and pause for 1 second, I can do it. Probably I will be breathing relatively faster than I like. But if the listeners start doing that, and then after a while start building that up, so after a while, breathe in for 5 seconds, hold for 5, exhale, and so on. At some point, they will find that it's getting hard. Maybe they will not get up to more than maybe 7 or 8 seconds, right? But that's really where the real work happens. So we see how we take one traditional yogic exercise, and depending on how we practice it, that's it's not what we do, it's how we do it. Depending on how we practice it, we can have no effect or a huge effect. So that's something that I believe was originally the intention behind pranayama, and I think it is all the different exercises there are still available to us to make us breathe better.
Absolutely, Anastasis. Now, in terms of you focus on using breath work for dealing with mental stress or getting better mental health. How does it work? Means for a general person, again, how do you use this breath work to actually deal with mental stress, which is, a lot of people are struggling with that in different spaces of their life. So how does that work?
Yeah, so it works on many levels, and I will come up with a parallelism, as I find it helps people grasp the concept a lot very easily. So before I start giving any exercises, I will invite our audience to think of stressful situations, panic attacks, anxiety, no matter where in the spectrum we are, as events, unfavorable events, or situations that we feel vulnerable. Similar with how a sailor would feel vulnerable if he finds himself in the sea. Let's imagine then that in our life, we are sailing through it, and at some point, because of turbulent water, because of unfavorable events, we are not anymore in the boat, we are in the sea. We need to survive and get ourselves back on the boat so we can continue with life. So now, going back to breath work, how can breathing help such an individual? There are two ways. The first one, and the one that most people think intuitively when they think about breathing exercises for stress, is to help the person become a better swimmer. So the stressful event has occurred, the person is in the sea. How can we help him stay alive, swim, so that he can make himself back into the boat? And for sure, there are breathing exercises that can help us achieve that. But I promised you that there is more than one ways of people finding help through breath work when it comes to anxiety and stress. And this is often overlooked, and it has to do with making the individual a better sailor. So breathing exercises, if done over time, this is not a quick fix, they can help people get less stressed. There are studies that it has been confirmed repeatedly that people with higher CO2 tolerance, and I don't want to overwhelm people now with the science here, but specific exercises that make us better breathers allow us to feel less overwhelmed when we are exposed to stress. So, if we were to choose, would you rather be better at swimming, or would you rather not finding yourself in the sea at first place? Ultimately, I think they both serve a purpose, but we cannot overlook either of them because I think they both have their value. The breathing exercises, which I can cover more if you're interested, if you want, are slightly different, but obviously they both are available there for us.
Right, right, Anastasis. Now, in terms of someone who wants to get started, someone who listens to this episode of yours and wants to get started, how can they do that? How do you get people started with breathing? Is there a and tell us about your book also, Breathing for Yoga. Uh, does that book contain? Who is this book for? Can people get started using that book?
Sure. So let's first start with the quicker answer, which is how one can get started, and then I can speak about the book. So the easiest way to get started is by allocating a little bit of time, preferably first thing in the morning, to breathing. And for that, I would say like maybe 5 to 10 minutes is sufficient initially. And for this, we need to choose one exercise only. I would say that in the beginning, start with any exercise you feel comfortable with, maybe you know already. But one exercise that I have seen working very well and setting the foundation for more advanced exercises in the future is the one that I mentioned earlier, the box breathing build-up. So as I was saying, and I have a podcast where I'm guiding through exercises. I'm not talking, it's just guided exercises, and it's called Breathwork with Anastasis. But anyone can create the exercise on his own. So you can be breathing for like 5 rounds of keeping the length of each cycle 3 seconds. So breathing in for 3, holding for 3, exhaling for 3, holding for 3. And after these 5 rounds, go to 5 rounds of 4 seconds each, and so on. Chances are that sooner or later they will get into a place where they will feel air hunger. And to the extent that they can do a few rounds where it is a little bit challenging, they are already in the right path. This, I would say, is probably going to be a good exercise for most health individuals, and I would not be surprised if some find it very hard or they are not able to go into air hunger, which I would probably consider an amber or red flag. It's not a good sign, but for the majority of people, for people that have a decent amount of respiratory capacity, that would be a great starting point. So I think this simple exercise is very, very powerful, and doing it on a daily basis will go a very long way. Right. Now, as the book says, the book covers what it says on the tin. So it's the title is Breathing for Yoga, and the foreword of the book was by a famous author called James Nestor, who has written The Breath, a very popular book. And in this book, I basically consolidated my findings, my research, and my teachings since 2000. It was published 2023, and it was all the work that I have done since 2016. And basically, it covers how breath can be incorporated, breath work, maybe you can say, how all these theories that we have and all the research that exists about optimal breathing can be incorporated in yoga, how yoga can improve someone's breathing capacity. So there is, like, for people to understand a little bit the whole concept, breathing has 2 compartments, the biochemical and the biomechanical. Biochemical is what I mentioned earlier, how breath affects oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitric oxide. The biomechanical is how the diaphragm moves, how our rib cage moves, how our abdominal moves. And the two work synergistically. Yoga on the asana level will affect a lot our biomechanics, but this can have a big effect on the biochemistry. So coming back to what the book covers, it covers how breathing theory, breathing exercises can be incorporated during a yoga practice, how an asana practice can improve one's breathing, and how the two have a synergistic effect. So there is a 3D model of breathing biomechanics there, a progressive way of challenging one's breath during a yoga practice. And yeah, there is lots of details there.
Wonderful, wonderful, Anastasis. There is lots to learn from you, and I'm sure a lot of people who want to learn more about you, from you, and also want to be your client. So, what is the best way for them to connect with you, Anastasis?
So there is lots of information on my website, which is Tzanis, my last name, .com. But I try to stay quite active on Instagram. So people that want to see some of my research, publications, YouTube as well. Actually, I should say on YouTube, there is quite a few videos. So social media, really, YouTube and Instagram is where people can stay in touch with me.
Wonderful, wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thanks, Ajay.